Right, hello, this is a bit of an experiment. I've never done one of these things before, but thank you if you're watching, and please feel free to send in any questions that you have around young people's mental health, student mental health, that sort of thing. Just tell you a bit about who I am. My name's Dominique Thompson. I'm a GP by background, and for many years I was a university GP at the University of Bristol. I have a particular interest in mental health, and over the years have worked to develop quite a lot of services around eating disorders and self were really struggling, and so I felt it was important to start thinking about how we got ahead of this problem. So about 2 years ago I left my clinical role to do other things to help young people with their mental health issues, and I work with universities now and lots of other organisations, but one of the things I did was write some books. And I wrote some for students to help them get through their first year at university, and I've also just written this book because this one is for parents of 11 plus year old teenagers and so on, to help them raise young people who are able to deal with life's ups and downs and be independent and so on. So I thought I would do this Q&A, and I'm happy to take any questions if you want to send any in. We've had a couple come through on Twitter, and so I'm going to start with those and see if anything else comes in. So one of the things that has been picked up on is that I've commented before that young people, especially students at university, can often take on too much stuff when they're at university. So they're not just doing their course, they join loads of societies, they're going out all the time. And what can they do really to look after themselves better? And one of the things that I really strongly recommend is that they actually pace themselves. So when they arrive at university, they perhaps just think about joining maybe one society for something that they know they're going to like. So if they're really into rugby or frisbee or cake baking, that they join that one. And then they maybe just join one other that they've never done before, is a completely new thing for them, but they might meet some new people and they might enjoy it and they might stretch themselves a bit. But not to immediately volunteer and throw themselves at everything, because there's a real risk that with the change in pace, the academic demands that they're not going to necessarily be ready for, they end up burning out a bit if they do too much, and they often don't sleep enough, which is one of the other big things I always say, is make sure they get enough sleep. And young people, especially teenagers, they need about 9 hours sleep, so that's often more than they realise, and sleep's just really important in loads of ways. So I think for me, they need to pace themselves and get their sleep. Another question that we've had is about preparing for the future, preparing for employment and the world of work, and what can students do in a really competitive world. If 1 in 2 young people now gets a degree and goes to university, as they do in the UK, excuse me, how can they be different and stand out? And my feeling here is that it's important that they do their best. They don't have to be the best, but they do their best at university in terms of their degree. But they also look to develop other skills that are really valued these days. So there are things like creative thinking, problem-solving skills, communication skills, leadership skills. All of those things are excuse me, really important in terms of being really useful and effective in the future workplace. Sorry about that. So when employers will look at young people joining, one of the things that they tell me when I go into employment workspaces now to talk to them about young people joining in the workplace and any mental health issues they may have and so on, they actually say one of the things they notice is that young people don't always have the social skills that they would expect. So they're not always as good at talking to people of different generations, as of course you need to be. So at university, you're often just with your own peer group. But you get in the workplace, there's people of all different ages, backgrounds, and so on. So anything we can do to help young people be really good at those social skills, at talking to people, different generations, that's a really useful thing. And they might not thank me for this, but I often suggest that with your teenagers, for example, or young people, to build this skill, that when you go to those like slightly funny family gatherings, for example, where you've got people of all different ages, you encourage your young person to go and talk to the grannies and the granddads and the uncles they haven't seen for ages, as well as hang out with their young friends and cousins, just so that they actually have those skills. And another sort of source of older people is, of course, their friends' parents. So if you are a friend parent, talk to your children's friends as if, you know, you were having an interesting conversation, you know, what do they think about stuff, and so on. So you can help them build those skills for the future. Okay, so we've got a question come in. What are my top 3 tips for freshers heading to university this month? So it's so important for young people to think about and prepare a little bit for that time, because they're going to arrive, there's going to be a real change of environment, new people, new timetables, new expectations. So for me, one of the things that I think is important is to think ahead and take a few things with them that they can put in their room that will still make them feel connected to home. So that's quite nice in terms of their environment. Maybe photos, maybe things that, you know, mean something to them. I think it's really important that they plan what I call the comms plan. So they're going to be leaving home, and their parents and families, carers, will have an expectation of hearing from them. They might have quite a different expectation of what is normal to communicate. So planning that in advance avoids those awkward mismatches between your parents expecting you to check in every 24 hours and you as a student, not surprisingly, being out quite late, or maybe staying over with a friend, or just going to lectures and forgetting, and then, you know, the parents are panicking because they haven't heard. We've had those scenarios at university. It's very worrying for everybody, and usually the student's completely fine and just forgot to call. So a comms plan, I think, is really important. So your environment where you're going to live, think about that. Think about your comms plan. And then I think one of the other things that's really important is not to lose your routine. So, you know, if you're used to, you know, eating at a certain time, sleeping at a certain time, and those things work for you, doing your exercise, getting outdoors, whatever works for you, don't lose it. Don't just suddenly let everything slide because you're so excited about the new environment and everything that everybody else is doing. If you know you need your 8-9 hours at night at sleep, then, you know, try and get those most of the time. Don't feel you have to go out every single night in welcome week. Lots of people are happy if you say, look, actually, why don't we tonight just sit around, chat, you know, get some crisps and snacks and things, and just sit in someone's room and chat. So pace yourself, but also stick to your routine. I think that's really important. Don't forget to send in any questions. I'm going to go on to one of the other ones that we had off Twitter. So, this is one that I get quite a lot as well. Somebody's asked about my take on the narrative that young people had it worse back in the day, and that maybe young people these days, you know, don't know how good they've got it and that sort of thing. So I'm always quite firm about this. I think young people these days have an enormous amount of pressure on them, and they live in a very different culture. And we're quite right when we say, oh, it wasn't like this in my day, because it wasn't like this. It was very different. Not better, not worse, but they are under very different pressures. So, for example, we have a sort of 24/7 society where young people can feel they have to be on and their best self, as they say, all the time. That is the image they need to project. They don't have the downtime they need. So as parents and carers and teachers and lecturers, we need to be aware of that and perhaps help them with that, tolerate the fact that they feel that pressure in terms of supporting them through it rather than being dismissive of it, and think about, you know, how they can have downtime, how they can, you know, put their screens away, put their phones away, just have time to be themselves, to just think about stuff, listen to music, go for a walk and so on. So the pressures that they're under, this 24/7 need to be their best self, is one of the main things that I think has changed. One of the others is that they are, as a generation, really, really worried about failure and letting people down. And this is one of the themes that comes through so many GP consultations for mental health. It's one of the things that we hear about all the time. You know, I'm just so so worried, they say, about, you know, telling my parents, I'm so worried about, you know, the fact that they've worked so hard to get me here. I don't want to let them down. They've got these expectations of me. And it's an enormous pressure in itself to do well, to get their degree, to succeed, but in an even more competitive environment than it was before. So I think it's a very different environment. And there are lots and lots of ways that 21st century life is very different. But also I think the parenting has changed. So I would say maybe my generation were brought up a little bit with benign neglect. We were not seen or heard from all day, and we'd come back in the evening. Nobody worried so much about that, and now that would be really unusual. We have to think about why that might be, what's changed, what are parents these days more worried about, or are the kids just so busy doing activities and doing stuff all the time that they don't have time to just be. I do actually address those things in the book, in How to Grow a Grown Up, because it was one of the things that prompted me and my co-writer to write the book, was how different things are these days. So I think actually we need to be aware that for young people, the world is a very different place and not always a happier place. And obviously there's lots of worries for them around politics and the climate. And today they are all out about climate change. And I absolutely support them doing that. I think they're probably, if it's not too cheesy to say it, this generation are going to save us. But, you know, we're not making it easy for them. So I think it's really important to remember things are different now, but not always in an easier or good way. Okay, so whilst we wait for any more questions that might come in, I'm just going to talk about what we mean by self-care. Somebody's quite rightly asked about how do we look after ourselves. When we tell young people it's important to look after themselves from a mental health and well-being point of view, what do we mean by that? And the nice thing is that there are some really quite good ways that people can look after themselves and self-care. It's interesting to think that some of the most important things that we can do they're not terribly complicated. For example, connecting with others, talking to others, hanging out with others, just sitting around with their friends. I say to them, just, you know, go down the pub and chat. It doesn't have to be deep and meaningful, but just sit around, put your phones down and talk to each other. You'll feel better for it. So connecting with others is really important. I think it's really important to keep active. We know that you've got to exercise for your physical health, but actually just get outside. I always say, go and stare at some trees or look at some squirrels. Don't touch the squirrels. That's always an issue. Students are always coming in with squirrel bites. But do go out and enjoy the outside, and at the same time, you know, have a bit of a walk, or, you know, run if you feel like it, or bike ride. Go for a hike at the weekends with your friends. But it's a really good thing is for them to get outside and do a bit of exercise. And another good thing, and again, it doesn't cost anything, is doing nice things for others makes you feel better. I mean, that's a sort of biologically proven fact. You get a little burst of happy hormones when you do something nice for others. So, you know, it might be something simple, like they might make their flatmate or their friend a cup of tea or a drink, or they might volunteer in a local charity shop, or they might go and work with the Students' Union and do some good things for others that way. And doing things for others, you know, it makes us feel good. So I think it's important to remember that lots of the things that we can do to self-care, to make ourselves feel better, they don't have to be complicated, they're not expensive, most of them are free. And it might be simple things like, you know, if you're into mindfulness or if you're into listening to just music, those things are really important too. Thank you. So I've just been asked when my new book is coming out. I'll just show you again because I'm so proud of my new baby. Basically, it's coming out on the 3rd of October. It is pre-orderable, if that's a word, and I'm keen that people should use their local independent bookshop if they want to order it, or of course you can order it online. But yeah, so it comes out on the 3rd of October, and I'm hoping that lots and lots of parents will just find it really useful. I am all about the practical. I wanted a book, and with Fabienne, my co-author, we felt we wanted to write the book that we would want to read as parents raising children in this century, and we wanted one place to go and see, like, what do I need to know about tech, what do I need to know about sleep, what do I need to know about mental health, what is it I need to know about, helping them to build self-esteem or self-control. And I want it in one place because there are so many amazing books and research papers and everything. So basically Fabienne and I thought, well, we'll do the work for our friends and our other parents that we know, and we'll put it all in one place. And that's what we're hoping, is that it'll be a really practical, and it's just got it's got top tips, it's got parent pointers, so these little sort of bits that are just your little top tips, and at the end of each chapter it's got a summary, so you've read the chapter, but if you want to later on, you've forgotten a bit about it, you can just go back and just read the summary points at the end of the chapter, a few months later. So we've tried to make it just really, really practical. So we've just got a few more minutes. If anyone wants to send in any more questions, I'll just briefly touch on one more topic that came in, which was about how young people can prepare for the workplace, and remember that they can sometimes feel a bit disconnected from all their peer group, and that moment of transition, it happens both when they leave home to go to university, when they leave home to go into the workplace, when they go into the workplace from university. All of those points of transition can be times when young people feel a bit disconnected. They can get the blues, as whether it's transition blues or university blues, they can just feel a bit disconnected, and they do need to prepare for that and make sure that it's as smooth as possible, and stay connected with friends, stay in touch with people, stay in their routine. Things like that will help them. So I'm just going to give it another moment, but I think we'll probably be calling it a day in a second. I hope that's been useful. I hope that's given you some ideas about things that young people can do to prepare for university, to prepare for going into the workplace, some of the skills that they need for later on in life, and to help them, manage and thrive really in the university and the workplace environment. Okay, thank you very much.